Today, we're going to talk about three different angles and three different things that could happen that could drastically change the Chicago Bulls rebuild a little bit, right? Like, it's just each incrementally. First, Modest Buzelis. Modest Buzelis talks about how he wants to reduce his three-point volume. I want to talk a little bit about that and why I think that with people thinking that the mid-range is dead, what they really don't realize is only bad mid-range shots are dead. They are still, if you're a really good scorer in this league, you do have to operate in the mid-range. So we're going to talk about what a mid-range game would actually do for Modest Buzelis. We're also talking about Jalen Duren, as it seems like the talks between him and the Pistons continue to break down even further. It's just more and more bad news. And could the Bulls slide in there in 2027 and try to get him? And then lastly, Rob Dillingham. We talked yesterday about how the Chicago Bulls tried to add the European guard, Sylvian Francisco, and he is very similar in skill set to Rob Dillingham. He's just a much better player. But why Rob Dillingham should take that personally? We're talking about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go into this content for today, y'all. And yeah, man, so we got a lot of things to talk about. And, somebody left a comment the other day and they were like, Haize, there's so many other players on this team. It seemed like you've been talking about Caleb Wilson and Modest Buzelis so much. And it's like, I went back and looked over the last 10 videos. We've done everything from covering every member of the bench to Josh Giddey, to Norman Powell, to the European guard, to all the free agents left that could fit the Chicago Bulls. Like, if y'all don't realize, if I cover somebody, it means that some news came out about them. That's usually what we do in the offseason. Secondly, to try to act like I only cover one or two players on this team is just asinine and just absolutely a falsity. Like I probably provide the most in-depth coverage of any Chicago Bulls channel in the offseason. Like, we've broken down everything on the bench. I say that to say this. Y'all got to calm down. Y'all got to calm down. And you know what it is? People react to what's in the title and don't actually look at the breadth of the video, what everything is in the video or in the episode. Read the description. I never just cover one thing on any episode. Never. It's always at least 3 topics, sometimes 4 on every single episode. So chill out, y'all. But I say that to say this. So Modest Buzelis was interviewed on the podcast. He's doing his rounds on podcasts right now, which it's the offseason. It's kind of what players do. And he talked about how he wants to take fewer three-pointers, right? And he basically is saying that he wants to become a 3-level scorer. And I respect that wholeheartedly about Modest because that is the next step for Modest's game. Now, of course, we want to see him be a more consistent defender, especially off ball, right? We want to see those things. But when you look at it, over half of Modest Buzelis' field goal attempts came from 3 last season. 6.4 of them to be exact last season. His mid-range was basically non-existent, right? If I'm not mistaken, less than 2% of his shots came from mid-range. At 6'8", with a handle, touch, athleticism, and he came into the league with his mid-range game being one of the things that he could talk about. These are one of the things that I disagree with my brother over on the Big Red Bus, C-Red Fred. C-Red Fred is an absolute amazing human being. I want to be clear on that. Y'all should go listen to the Big Red Bus. Even if you don't always agree with Fred's kind of thoughts, because his Isaac Okoro trade stuff is out of this world, you should definitely go and check out C-Red Fred and Doug Tonis over there, right? And I think the thing with what Modest Buzelis' shot profile became last season that people need to stay aware of is that it's not an issue in taking threes. It's the fact that when your shot profile is so predictable, it makes you easier to defend, right? And then that gets us to the next topic, the whole thing of the mid-range shot being dead. It's not. Bad mid-range shots are dead, meaning that there are still efficient shots that you can take in the mid-range. I think now everybody's kind of associated mid-range with meaning that you're only one step in from the free throw line. Now, that mid-range shot is probably a bad mid-range shot. But when you run actions in the man, that's the thing I think that people, and especially some younger Bulls fans, have kind of forgotten, is that everybody who shoots in the mid-range isn't DeMar DeRozan. It doesn't mean that you're creating exclusively in the mid-range. I don't think anybody's saying that Modest needs to become a point where 20% of his shots are mid-range. but you want to open it up, right? When you look at it, analytics did not eliminate the mid-range shot. People blame analytics. It's not, analytics did not do that. When you still go and look at anybody who talks about mid-range and their thing is go to, well, analytics say it's just not a quality shot. They're lying to you. And again, this is why when people try to weaponize analytics for one specific outcome, it's always going to be bad. Analytics does not say the mid-range shot is bad. The analytics say that some mid-range shots are bad depending on where you are, but then that's the point of running actions. When you look at the best scorers in the league, they all take a heavy volume of creating in the mid-range. You're talking about Shea, you're talking about Jokic, you're talking about Kevin Durant, you're talking about Kawhi Leonard, you're talking about Anthony Edwards. All these players have a high, even for the teams that well, Boston is a crazy three-point shooting team. Yeah, but still almost 15% of their shots, if I'm not mistaken, last season were mid-range shots, right? So you don't need to be taking, contested 18-footers. No, shoot a three. That's the more viable shot in that case, right? But it's about creating actions to get you open mid-range shots, and that's the thing that you're going to do. Also, creating in the mid-range doesn't always mean you're shooting in the mid-range. Use the mid-range to create shots if you're becoming a passer, and especially how we want to develop Buzelis as a point forward to create open looks for other players on the outside. Again, the mid-range shot is not dead. Bad mid-range basketball is dead, and that's what people need to understand if they're going to have this conversation about mid-range shots. Let's talk about what the mid-range shot unlocks, right? It's about counters, not about nostalgia. How you counter what defenses do, that's what you do, right? If defenders run Buzelis off the three-point line, then what are you going to do? Not everything's going to be at the rim. You can run a shooter off the three-point line, but still pack it in to get ready for them to attack the rim. If you take two dribbles, right, especially with Buzelis' long strides and stuff like that, if you do that, you're not forcing your way into a rim protector. You stop at 10 to 12 feet, right? And then you could take it, especially with this height and the lift that he gets, you can rise over smaller wings and get that mid-range shot, right? Against bigs, you can use his handle to create separation in the mid-range, right? It turns yourself from just a shooter and a finisher to an actual scorer. If you want to make that step from being that to an actual scorer, guess what? You have to shoot in the mid-range as well. One thing that people, again, who like to overstate that this mid-range shot is dead is want to talk about being a three-level scorer. You can't complain about every mid-range shot and then say you want to see somebody become a three-level scorer, because guess what? To score at three levels, it means all three types of shots have to be open for you. The three-point, the rim, and the mid-range. And specifically when you look at the quality shots in the mid-range, right? I said that bad mid-range shots are dead. Quality shots in the mid-range means shooting at the nail and at the elbow, right? And that is where most of the high-level scorers end up doing. If we want Miles to take this leap to become an 18 to 22 point per game scorer, then yeah, it focuses on the 10 to 15 foot game. It gets you touches at the nail. It gets you those elbow pull-up shots that are actually still beautiful basketball, and it creates opportunities for those one dribble pull-ups after closeouts and drives could stall, right? It doesn't mean drifting on one-legged fadeaways in the mid-range that are almost three-point range. It's not that. It's about being selective and controlled within your mid-range usage, and that is the next step that you should want to see Buzelis takes, right? And I think why you look at it, especially if we want to become a playoff team, you need to look at what matters in the playoffs. Regular season offense gives you more transition and more mismatches. That's what you try to attack in regular season basketball. Playoff defenses like to switch, right? Like to load up. They like to take away the first option, maybe even the second option. If teams run Buzelis off the three-point line and then aim to protect the rim, where do you have to go? The 10 to 12-footer is the answer and counter to that on the defensive side of the ball. If Modest wants to be a good playoff scorer as well, you need to be able to go somewhere when the defense runs you off the line and takes away the obvious stuff. That is the mid-range shot, right? Now, with that, I say this: don't abandon the three, right? And I think that should be clear. But I'm going to say it because there are some people that are on the littler bus. You know, we call it the short bus. There are some people that are on that don't always understand when you explain things. But Chicago's right when you have the projected lineup that the Chicago Bulls do, it does mean that you're going to have the balance to try to figure out where you can. Buzelis can't go from taking 6.4 3-pointers per game all the way down to like 2. That's not what we're saying here. It's just about adding another diet to it. So staying between 5 and 5.5, which means you're dropping 1 to 1.5 threes per game, create more rim pressure, more in the mid-range. Again, that's a better overall shot profile if you want to develop into a more complete scorer, right? And so when you look at the third-year leap and the offensive leap that Modest needs to take, year one, it was about finish and the flashes that Modest Buzelis had. Year two, last season, he became a higher volume scorer, but not necessarily a high volume scorer for the entirety of the year. Towards the end of the year, yes, right? But in year three, you want him to start being a three-level creator, meaning that he can shoot and try to score at all three levels, but also give him more opportunity to create for others as well. See if you can develop that point forward mentality and that game for him, right? That's also going to make Caleb Wilson, Nick Claxton, other guys' jobs easier. Modest taking fewer threes, what excites me if it means that he's becoming harder to guard and a more complete scorer. And that's ideally what you want to see for this Bulls team. That's my thoughts. All right. With that said, moving on from that, spent 10 minutes on that. I could have went even deeper on it because I know some people are still like, you throw a bunch of numbers at them, they get a little bit confused. That's why I didn't want to make it too analytics heavy. If you guys are interested in me getting to a more analytic based on why the mid-range shot is still important, breaking down numbers, statistics, those type of things, let me know down in the comment section. All right, moving on from that. Jalen Duren, right? Jalen Duren's playoff struggles and of what that's done for him in his deal. Reportedly, him and the Detroit Pistons are still far away, which could open up an opportunity where even if he does sign, this is the most likely outcome is he's going to sign, he's going to take the guaranteed money, and they'll figure stuff out later. The Bulls should still be watching this situation, in my personal opinion, for what can happen with Jalen Duren. And I know I'm going to talk about all sides of it because I know some Bulls fans are going to say, but Haize, the playoffs, why would we want a guy in the playoffs that did what he did? No, right? Let's talk about it, right? There's some nuance that needs to be talked about in this situation. Not a debate, just some nuance, right? When you look at the 2025-26 postseason, it was disappointing. 10.2 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists, 1.2 blocks per game. Now, he did shoot 51.4% over the playoffs, which is solid, right? But when you look at that and how it pales in comparison to what he did in the regular season, where he averaged 19.5 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, 65% field goal shooting percentage overall. So the question is that why? Why would somebody still want to pay him, near max money? And I don't think he's going to get max money. Well, the Pistons could give him that. But why would you want to pay him that? And the thing is that he's 22 years old. That is the thing that you can't ignore in any of this. There are players in the league right now that are coming in that are absolutely older than Jalen Duren. So we got to stop acting like players are just a finished product, right? There is a reason to believe that Jalen Duren, he is an extremely young player that, yeah, playoff woes are concerning, but that doesn't all of a sudden mean that you're going to live in that. Right now, it is concern, and we'll talk about why his contract should be reflective of the concern that it has. But there isn't just simply that he didn't fail to do the same thing. People miss the fact that his playoff role did change. Detroit did not go to him as much as they did in the regular season. Now, one could say that is still a reason why if we're not going to go to you as much, your contract's going to go. But his role did get contracted and it got more simplified, right? He lived more off the broken plays and offensive rebounds than them creating for him in the pick and roll like they did in the regular season. Now, that is not an excuse for everything that we saw from it, but it does need to be part of the evaluation. Again, nuance, right? When you look at the Jalen Duren, the fit concerns are real. He's not a modern big that can stretch the floor. The free throw shooting is still a concern, right? His defensive scheme versatility is a little questionable. He's not like the switchable big that like a Nick Claxton is defensively, but he's a much bigger big than those guys as well. And he's not like he doesn't have that switchability that those type of modern centers that you like to get into. And then does he really fit next to Giddey, Caleb, and Modest if Caleb's jumper is not great right now, right? That's, again, a thing that we could watch. And then overall, the contract watch. Like, I think this. If the talks with Detroit are as messy as they appear, now watch me post this video, and he signs within an hour of me posting this video. The reported range is between 35 to 38 annually that he's looking for, right? And so, theoretically, Jalen Duren could take the qualifying offer, go into unrestricted free agency next year. Now, that is making a huge bet because if he has another bad playoffs and Detroit's not motivated to play him or he just has a bad season, that value is dropping, and it's dropping quick, my boy. But I think at the same thing, you don't want to assume anything in a case like this, but monitor it. And that's really what I'm saying here. I'm not saying, hey, the Bulls should be all in on Jalen Duren, but monitor it. And I think one of the things that you could do if you do end up trying to get Jalen Duren in 2027, because again, we don't have the cap space right now. Technically, we do a sign and trade. It could be a little bit difficult with where Detroit is with the roster, but I'm kind of more focused on if he is a free agent or available in 2027, I'll say this: front load the contract. That is what I do anyway. And I'd say this: almost any contract that the Bulls sign now that goes past 2 years, starting next offseason, front load the contract. That way, it's less money when Modest and Josh Giddey's next extension and Caleb Wilson needs an extension, right? I think that that's something that the Bulls can do, and that is a weapon when you're trying to maximize cap space and flexibility that more teams are going to start using in this second tax apron era is front load the contract. It fits the timeline. It's all smart when you look at it as well. And then it matters, like if Jalen Duren fits and you want to keep him long term, it matters in that. If Caleb and Modest's spacing is legit, that's there. Now, what do you need to see if you're the Chicago Bulls before you be willing to take a shot at Jalen Duren? A, how much does Nick Claxton actually fix the Chicago Bulls defense? Does Claxton rebound to what he was before when he was getting Defensive Player of the Year awards, right? Caleb shooting, is it legit, right? How do you feel about the bench depth in the bigs, right? And I think when you look at this, if you look at the summer of 2027, where I'm talking about possibly going after Jalen Duren will be 23. Josh Giddey would be 24. Caleb Wilson would be 21. Modest Buzelis would be 22, if I'm not mistaken. That's a young core with an actual timeline, and you'd be investing to that. You're not attaching money or taking a shot on an aging star. You're taking a shot on a guy that was an all-star at a young age, right? And I think that that's where I stand at with the Jalen Duren thing. I think that Jalen Duren is an interesting prospect to watch how this develops with Detroit, and you could snake it, slide in there, and maybe get your center of the future and the center of right now, because he's also a player that's ready to compete in things right now. Now, I'm not saying that the Bulls should hinge all their future, thoughts on a center just to Jalen Duren. That's not what I'm saying in this, and I don't mean for that to come off that way. But I am saying that it should be something that he's a player that's worth monitoring and watching. And I think regardless of what happens, if this falls apart and he takes the qualifying offer and he's a free agent, or for some reason they do like the Jonathan Kuminga thing where it's a 2-year deal with the second year being whatever ends up happening, watch out for it, because it's something that I would not mind taking a shot with the right scenarios and situations. And if Jalen Duren does have a bit of a bounce back and still has a solid regular season, I wouldn't necessarily be against it. Last topic of the day before we get up out of here. Rob Dillingham is officially on notice. And I think in a good way and in a bad way. It depends on how you want to look at it, right? With us hearing that the Bulls went after Sylvian Francisco, they pursued him in the offseason. Keep in mind, he's 6'1", 6'2" guard that can pass, that can score, that can shoot, that can do all those things. When you look at that, it fits the general description of what people think that Rob Dillingham, people that still have hope. Now, you guys know, I'm not the biggest Rob Dillingham guy. I'm just not. I don't believe in Rob Dillingham. But I will say this, Rob Dillingham should look at the Bulls in their pursuit of Francisco and say, I can do all of that. Let me go out here and show y'all. He's a small guard. He's fast. He's a pick-and-roll creator. He's a pull-up shooter. He's a bench scorer, right? He can do all those type of things. Rob Dillingham should be wanting to fit that role. And here's the thing. Rob Dillingham's shown flashes. Even with me not being the biggest Rob Dillingham fan, he's shown flashes. He showed some of those flashes after coming to Chicago and actually getting to play, and he talked about it. Like, he had an opportunity to fail. He didn't have that in Minnesota, right? When you look at the Washington and the Denver games that he played, he showed tremendous upside in those games. The three-point shooting percentage, though, that was where you have some concern about it. So I think that Rob Dillingham has to become a better three-point shooter if he's going to want to be a scorer in the NBA. Now, you guys know my thought process. If you've been watching or listening to me for a while, it comes down to, I think Rob Dillingham needs to become and focus on being a facilitator first. Become a really good facilitator for your teammates, especially coming off that bench. I think there's definitely going to be a role for you if you're able to do those things and do it consistently. But at the same time, he came into the league as a scoring guard. If you want to do that, you have to shoot the ball better. That's it, right? So I think when you look at the flashes that he showed after coming to Chicago, that's there. He averaged 9.6 points, 3 rebounds, 2.8 assists in 21 and a half minutes. That's over 30 games. He shot 42.8% from the field, 30% from 3. So like that 3-point shooting percentage, if you can get that better, then you can do some things. We'll see, right? And again, he should very much look at Sylvian Francisco and say, I can do those things. If you start being a better 3-point shooter, right? Because shooting was supposed to be one of Rob Dillingham's greatest strengths, and he's not there. The 30% from 3 is not good enough. It's just not good enough. For a 6'2" guard that already has defensive limitations, Your passing and your shooting needs to be there. I would say, and I know it's a steep, but he needs to shoot at least 36% from three this season if he wants to show those things. And he has to find a way that instead of simply playing fast, how do you play with speed? Those are different things that people need to understand. This goes to the Jordan Brink part of the conversations, right? Jalen Duren's first step is quick, it's burst, it's fantastic in regards to it, right? He can freeze the defender, he can use it coming around screens, he can do all those type of things. But if he doesn't get it under control and find a way to turn that speed, that being fast into functional speed is going to be a thing. Also, playing under control, you average 2.1 turnovers and 2.8 assists. It's not sustainable. If you want to be a bench guard on this team, it's just not sustainable. You don't need to be Chris Paul with the assist to turnover ratio, but you do need to get better in there. And I also say, find a way to become survivable defensively. Can't you do that? Because right now, he hasn't done that much. So these are the things that Rob Dillingham is going to have to prove, in my personal opinion, if he wants to prove that he can become an NBA player. The three-point shot needs to come back. 36% or better. My personal thing. Be that guard that understands how to use the change of speed to put pressure on the defense. Not every possession, not every time you get the ball needs to be full speed. Learn to manipulate the defense with the change of speed that you can bring, unless it's in transition. Get those turnovers under control. Move towards being a better and a higher assist to turnover ratio player. And then, of course, be survivable on the defensive side of the ball. Compete. Fight over screens. Know the rotations of players, like those type of things. And having really good defenders out there that communicate is going to help with that for every player on this team. But I think that Rob Dillingham could be there, right? I think this. As much as I don't believe in Rob Dillingham, if Rob Dillingham does hit, it saves resources for the Bulls. It's one last thing we have to go out there and find. If he can become a 12 to 13 point per game scorer with 4 to 5 assists coming off the bench, that's real value in a bench point guard. It just is, right? You may not need to go out and find a European guard. You may not need to spend on money on a bench reserve. You may feel more comfortable trading Trey Jones if something like that happens. When you're able to have players step up, it saves on resources. The same thing that we want to see with like Jalen Swain. Can he become that secondary scorer? Like those are the type of things that you're going to look at there. And that's it, right? So I'll say this. The pursuit of Sylvian Francisco should be a clue to Rob Dillingham that this team needs somebody that fits, or wants somebody that fits the role that you should be able to fit. Now come out here and earn it. Earn that role. Take it. You now have an opportunity, because the Bulls couldn't complete that trade, to do it. Training camp should be a statement for you on what you want and how you feel like you can impact this team. Let's see you go out there and do it. Because as much as, like, when I say I don't believe in players, you're wearing a Chicago Bulls jersey. I would love nothing more than to come to y'all this time next year and say, listen, I was wrong about Rob Dillingham. He had an amazing season. It was great. Let's continue to build with that. He can be that bench scorer that we need. I would love that. If we end up looking at Rob Dillingham, Jalen Swain, Leonard Miller, those three players as being legit bench pieces for the Chicago Bulls, and maybe even with the upside of more, throw in Noah Essengate to that as well, give me 3 of those 4 guys. If they hit, hell, if 2 of those 4 guys end up hitting and becoming real NBA rotation players, whether that's starting or coming off the bench, that does nothing but help this rebuild that the Chicago Bulls are in. And that's what we all should want as fans. So let's see if he can do it. Let's see if he can do it. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Chicago Bulls Central, man. I love the thought process of Modest Buzelis wanting to become a more 3-level scorer. I love that. We're going to see, again, if you guys want me to dive deeper into the mid-range analytics, give y'all the real take on it, let me know that down below. The Jalen Duren part of it, watch it. Watch the Jalen Duren part, and let's just see how that evolves and if the Chicago Bulls can get inserted into that. And then as far as Rob Dillingham, go out there and prove it. You have an opportunity now to provide something internally that the Bulls were looking at bringing in somebody to fill. Let's see what you can make of that. But that's it. Make sure you guys sound off in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all 3 topics that we covered. Make sure you guys also hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. You can follow us at Chicago Bulls Central on every social media podcast or every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.